vampires, stand users, ghosts. It only makes sense that eventually in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure anime series that we would get aliens. And you're gonna get all of that and more in this week's episode of Diamond is Unbreakable. Brace yourself for ridiculousness. This week's episode of JoJo was just plain strange. You can play the X-Files theme over the entire episode, and that's because we are introduced to this character who goes by the name of new Mikitakasho Nishi. It's a really hard name to say, so I'm just going to call him New. He's an alien. He's actually from another planet, and he has some really awesome alien-like abilities, although he seems to have been scratched by the mystical bow and arrow. Are we seeing his stand powers in this episode, or are these actually the superpowers of a superpowered alien? Not to mention, his ability allows him to transform into anything. And I mean absolutely anything. The image of New transforming into a massive back scratcher is horrifying. This week's episode of JoJo was actually really simple, but the best thing about it is the introduction of this brand new character. New is hilarious. He basically looks like a straight combination of Spock from Star Trek and a stereotypical Japanese street punk from the 1990s. He's got this ridiculous piercing that goes from his ear all the way to his nose, and he kind of reminds me of that one asshole from Return of the Living Dead. What's the matter with you? You think this is a costume? This is a way of life! Not only that, but I think it's really funny that he's got these like alien elements all over his body with these little spaceships on his school uniform, planets up on the collar, and he even has something that says E.T., I believe, on his belt. Not to mention, he actually shows up sleeping in a crop circle. All evidence is pointing to the fact that this dude is an alien, although there might be a little bit more to this. At the very beginning of the episode, Kira's father is still floating around town, and the bow and arrow is dragging his ass around and looking for any candidates that it can give stand powers to. And when it finally finds New, it starts to go towards him, it's about to pierce him, but it actually gets blocked and pushed away, but it still manages to scratch a small part of his neck. And this is where the biggest part of the episode comes into play. Is New actually a stand user, or does he legitimately have cool kick-ass alien powers that allow him to transform into anything? It's a complete mystery in this episode, but what is made clear is that New is not exactly a bad guy. Very similar to the last episode, this is another character who is sort of sporadically created from the bow and arrow, or is trying to be used as a villain of Kira and his father, and he's transforming into this goofy side character who looks like he's probably going to be an important part of the group. And I only say that because there's a brand new opening in this week's episode of JoJo, and more on that at the very end of the review. But at the very end of that intro, you get to see him standing with all of the main characters. So I have a feeling that he's probably going to be a very important ally, and the fact that he can transform into anything is pretty damn awesome. There's a great scene in this episode where he's trying to convince Josuke and Okuyos that he really is an alien, and they just do not believe him. At first they think it's just this huge joke, they bowl over laughing, and then eventually they realize this guy is not giving up his story that he's an alien, and they want some proof from him. He claims that he has a spaceship, but it's going to take 3 days to get to Earth. He supposedly has some superpowered weapons, but he left those on the spaceship, of course. However, suddenly we have these fire trucks which start to go through town, and they're blaring their sirens, and because this guy has like Spock alien ears, he has really sensitive hearing, and he starts to freak out, and it actually gives him this sort of like allergic reaction where he has all of these boils starting to appear all over his face, and he tries to run away, and this is when he reveals his power to transform into anything, and he transforms into a pair of sneakers, which Josuke puts on and runs away with him. He actually makes him run up the side of a building, in a scene which is just downright hilarious, and Josuke of course is on his guard, and he even uses Shining Diamond against him, but apparently this guy cannot see the stand, so he might not be using stand powers after all, but because he actually saved this alien's life, New has decided that he's going to give Josuke one special wish, one special favor, and Josuke has this really stupid plan where he's going to have the alien transform into a pair of dice, and he's going to use those dice to play a gambling match with Rohan Kishibe, because he just really wants to get all of his money, because his mom, being the bitch that she is, learned that he actually won the lottery, and what does she do? She freezes his account. Why the hell would she do that? Maybe she's trying to teach him a lesson about actually trying to earn your money. They don't really get into it too much, but it's summertime in Morio, and Josuke needs some summer spending money. So he's going to play this dice game with Rohan Kishibe, and at the very end of the episode, Rohan reluctantly decides that he's going to play against him. Not so much for the sport of it, but just so that he can take all of Josuke's money, because Rohan makes it clear in this episode he does not like Josuke whatsoever. Does Rohan even like anyone? However, while they're actually playing this game, it looks like the alien is going a little too far, and he's winning Josuke way too much money to the point where it's starting to look very suspicious. And Rohan's a pretty smart character, so he's probably going to learn very soon that something is not quite right. But I'm glad that we're going to get a little bit more from this episode, because the last one was wrapped up in a single episode with a rock, paper, scissors battle. This one right here is just hilarious, and I really can't wait to see the confirmation if this guy is an alien or not. I think it's a really funny mystery. I mean, he definitely looks like one and acts like one, but in the JoJo series, you really never know what to expect. Oh, and let's not forget that a good chunk of this episode was also devoted to Kira and his brand new family. He really wants to get away from this life, and he wants to go back to killing people, and he even wants to kill his brand new wife. And there's a fantastic scene in this episode where she's getting all lovey-dovey with him, and she starts to undress, and he gets real close to her as if he's about to wring her neck. However, this causes him to accidentally rip her clothes off, which she sees as a turn-on. I have a feeling that a lot of the biggest jokes from this is going to be the fact that he's going to try and be menacing, but he's always going to come across as being like a romanticizing idiot. It's really funny, and you can definitely tell it's going to be important, especially the son that they have, because you get to see them in the brand new intro. And speaking of the intro, I love the visuals. I think they're great. I really think they fit the energy of JoJo. You get to see a lot of new stuff and some great teasers, but I just don't really like this song all that much. Maybe I'm going to have to hear it a couple of more times, but I certainly preferred, I think, the second intro to all of them. And we don't know if there's going to be a new ending or not, because they went straight through the credits in the scene at the very end, like you just got to see them playing over the scene. But I have a feeling they're probably still going to stick with Savage Garden's I Want You. I still think it's a perfect ending for the series, and they always manage to add a lot of new imagery to it, so I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we see our new alien friend in the ending of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of JoJo? I really just don't have that much to say aside from the fact that I can't wait to learn if this guy's actually an alien or if he's just a stand user. The mystery behind this episode is what I really love about it. And the concept of the bow and arrow not actually working on an alien being is really interesting. Like, that's really opening up a lot of, things to think about for the future of the series. I mean, if we have an alien in the show now, there's the potential that we're going to see more of them in the future, or this just might be a one-time thing. I mean, do we now have room for a lot of other ridiculous things? I mean, let's bring in some freaking werewolves and some mummies while we're at it. I mean, they can have a lot of fun with this series. It's very clear that the creator of the show really didn't set any, parameters or extreme rules for what he could do with the show, and in many ways, that always manages to help out the series, because I didn't expect there to be a ghost story in this arc at all, and I sure as hell didn't expect there to be aliens. Somebody call Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum. Welcome to Earth. One thing that did bug me about this episode, though, is that some of the artwork moments, at least to me in this episode, didn't look very great all the time. I mean, there were certainly some pretty decent shots in this episode. This wasn't a super elaborate episode of JoJo or anything, but there were just a few moments where the characters' faces just looked a little off and just a little sloppy, but for the most part, that's me just nitpicking about what is otherwise a pretty excellent episode of JoJo, which had an element to it which I frankly just did not expect. It also had a lot of humor behind it as well. The fact that we now have a character who can transform into anything as long as it is within his power and it's not complex machinery is a pretty interesting concept, and I'm sure he's going to make a great ally, and he's already becoming one of my favorite characters just because of how crazy he is overall. So I love this one right here. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. There were some great moments, and I loved all of the tension with Kira and his brand new family, and throwing an alien into the series might seem a little strange at first, but honestly, it fits right at home in this type of anime. So, 4 out of 5 from me. But if any of you guys did watch this week's episode of Diamond is Unbreakable, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Is Nu actually an alien, or is he a stand user? You guys are awesome! Thank you for watching this review, I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and please leave a comment. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!